we're rolling. Nico, hey, hi, hello, how are
What's
you?
up? Great. Great.
Nico, I remember when I first met you. So, Nico and I met at an internship when we were in college. And I remember seeing Nico and just being like, immediately, I was like, we're too cool. He's too cool for us to be friends. Like, I just like, you just had like you had such a cool like hair style. And I was just like, he's just so cool. And
I'm pretty
and
sure
the
I was wearing at like our little intern meeting. I'm pretty sure I was just wearing like khakis and like a gray shirt. I don't think I probably looked
whatever,
very cool.
whatever. I was immediately like, nope, like that. No, we will not be friends. But we became friends and it was
Such good
amazing.
friends.
Very good friends. And I remember because we ended up like living together for like 2 weeks at the end because my
Yeah.
lease was up. And then I like couch surfed on your couch for like a couple weeks. And
Yeah, that was an interesting like situation too with my living situation because the person that was also living in that house just sort of like up and left. So I remember being like, yeah, I kind of just have this place to myself if you if you want to come live with me.
I was like, cool, thumbs up. And I remember we were chatting one time and you just had such a chill outlook on life that I just like could not identify with. Like you were like you're like, "Oh, I think after college," like we were going into our senior year. You were like, "I think after college I'm just going to like travel, like, just whatever." And I was like, "Okay, cool. Here I'll be like white knuckling it through senior year being like, I need a fucking job." Like you were just so like chill about it and I just like remember just being like, "Oh my god, that's fantastic." Like I'm curious. I have like two questions. Like, but one, have you always just had like a chill attitude around things?
I think in general, yeah, I try not to get too worked up about things that I can't control. Um, but I guess a lot of people might say that I'm also like not super chill in some areas. Like I really love traveling, obviously, and I have a really sort of like adventurous lifestyle, or at least I try to have that. So I guess in that sense too, like I'm not super chill. But yeah, as far as like stressing about things, I try not to give too much like attention or like yeah, too much of my attention to things that I just genuinely cannot control, especially if I've like done the best I can in that situation, right? I sort of just like let the rest of it play out as long as I know that I've done everything that I possibly can and that was in my power to like set myself up because everything out like after that it's kind of not in my control.
Right. Like, what can you do? And like, but I also appreciated um your your ability to think that like everything's gonna work out. So like in the like job after college thing, I was like, if I don't immediately get a job after college, no one will ever hire me. I will like, never have a job type of thing. And like you just have always had like such a good like faith about things that like everything's gonna work out that I've always really appreciated.
Thanks. I
Yeah.
think that also comes from like it, I guess for like lack of a better terms, like betting on myself. I think especially at that point in college, I had seen success in things that I like genuinely put a lot of effort and time into, and I saw how that panned out, and I saw the difference between me pursuing something like with passion versus me pursuing something that I was necessarily maybe just told or felt like I should pursue, and what the difference in that result was. Like, for example, that internship that we had, I remember I didn't do any recruiting through my business school. And so everything was basically just blind resume drops online for companies that I actually was interested in. And I chose like four companies. If I were to do this again, I probably would not do it the same way. But I chose like four companies, and there were four like pretty major companies. At the time, I thought that was a lot, but for a junior, I guess, four blind resume drops online is not a lot. But it worked out for me. And um, I had a few other areas too during college, like with cheerleading too, and being like on that nationals team that had panned out really well. And I just sort of had a lot of confidence in my own abilities and what I was learning in school and the connections that I was making, and felt confident that whatever direction after graduation, I could more or less make it happen.
I love that. I love that. And so after graduation, you decided to travel.
Yeah.
You were like, I think you were planning on just going for a month, and it ended up being longer. Like, can you tell me a bit about like your like obsession? I don't know if that's a fair term, but like
Oh, it
obsession with
totally,
travel.
yeah.
Yeah, tell me about that.
Yeah, not to sound cheesy or anything, because I feel like so many people are like, I love traveling, but I actually do really, really love traveling. And I went into college, like even in high school, I knew that after college, I wanted to take a gap year. Whether or not it was going to be like a full year or not, I wasn't sure, but I knew that I wanted to take time and travel because um, I had had conversations with people, like older people who were settled into their careers, and they said, the one thing that I wish I did was travel or take time off after I graduated college, because that's like the only time in my life where I've had a large break in between like careers, or in between, between school and work. Um, so even going into college, I knew that by the time I graduated, I wanted to put myself in a position that would allow me to travel for ideally a year, but maybe a handful of months if that's what it came down to. Um, so it was always on my radar, and I think that was always something in the background that I was working towards. And landing that internship that we had also gave me a lot of reassurance, because it was a great internship and we had great experience. We made like really good connections, and so I felt confident going after graduating to just travel. And I remember also talking to some of the managers and being like, yeah, I think I'm just going to travel after I graduate, because you kind of have to have those conversations about what you're planning to do and if you want to go back to the company. And they were super supportive of it. So I was like, all right, cool. I basically just have green lights on all fronts, gonna make it happen. But yeah, I left. Let's see, we had our graduation ceremony on a Saturday, and I think I flew out that Monday with a one-way ticket to Thailand. And
Insanity.
met up with my friend there. She's actually one of my best friends. We've been like best friends since high school. Met up in Thailand, ended up staying in Southeast Asia for like 3 or 4 months. We went to Thailand, then we went to Vietnam, Indonesia, and then we ended in Nepal, where we did some hiking in the Himalayas. One of the craziest things I think I've ever done. It was monsoon season. Don't recommend hiking the Himalayas in monsoon season.
It was like at
Uh,
the end of your trip too, and you're like exhausted and everything.
yeah, and yeah, exhausted, tired. Like we had just been literally living in Asia for a long time, and you realize that you miss a lot of things about Western culture when you are just sort of backpacking Asia for several months. Like even like a proper toilet or bathroom. It's like
Dude, it's the little
could not
things.
wait. Yeah, I could not wait to get back to like clean showers and bathrooms. Um,
But
but yeah, no.
you also like love the like gritty travel though.
Oh
Like
yeah, I totally do.
what's like your favorite part of like traveling in general? Like do you have a favorite part? That's like such a broad question.
Yeah, I love the adventure of it all. So I guess I would say two things. One, I love the adventure of it all. And there's something about being in like a country or a city that you are completely unfamiliar with, where it's almost like a sensory overload, like every single day, right? Because you could do something new every single day, see something new every single day, taste something new every single day. So it's like every sort of moment when you're traveling in a place that you're unfamiliar with is basically like a new adventure, or like an opportunity for a new adventure. And then I think number two, also, I love meeting new people. Like that I would put those two on like equal planes. And part of why I like sort of just like roughing it or staying in hostels or backpacking or whatever is because it gives you so many opportunities to meet people from all over the world, like whether it's people who live in that country or that city that you're in, or people who are visiting that city or country that you're in. Um, And specifically, like staying in a hostel, being put in that environment, it's almost like a college dorm. It's almost like reminiscent of being a freshman in a dorm where you have so many people from all over the place who maybe have nothing in common, but the one thing that sort of connects all of them is that they're in a new country and they're stuck all in this similar like social situation. And so you kind of have no choice but to start making connections, especially if you're like traveling alone or with like one other person. um, Obviously you want to try and make friends and like see what other people have done, get tips on things to see, things to do, all that kind of stuff. And then you kind of part ways, and because of social media it's so easy to stay in touch with people. And now all of a sudden you have this network of like friends or acquaintances all over the world. And it's happened several times too where I've been in other people's countries and I've been able to stay with them or meet up with them, or sometimes I guess even like bumped into them randomly, almost randomly. But yeah.
That's awesome. That's so cool. I kinda wanna switch gears a little bit. So, spoiler alert, I'll probably, like, spoil it in the intro anyways, but, like, you're a model, which is cool, and, like, you talked about how you, um, don't necessarily go after goals that people say that you should go after. So, I'm curious, like, when did your desire for, like, I don't want a typical job kind of, like, happen? Like, when did you have, like, a realization moment?
I think ever since I was a kid, I was always interested in the idea of owning my own business. And when I was younger, I didn't really understand, I think, to the extent, well, definitely not to the extent that I do now, but I didn't really understand what that meant or what that would entail. But I liked the idea of creating something yourself and sort of like being your own boss, um, and being able to grow your own business. Like my favorite game as a kid was Monopoly, I think, just because it sort of entailed a little bit of business. And then even in high school, I knew that I wanted to study business, or at least I thought I knew I wanted to study business, um, with the goal to focus on entrepreneurship and to learn the skills necessary to eventually start a business. Um, Ended up studying business at Michigan, and unfortunately, I was a little bit disappointed with the business program at the time because there wasn't a lot of room for entrepreneurship classes. And I actually did an entrepreneurship certificate, which was basically a minor, but it was weirdly enough through the School of Engineering,
Hmm.
because the engineering kids, there was enough interest there. They wanted like a business degree or like an entrepreneurship minor, and that wasn't offered by the business school. So they made one for themselves. So I thought it was a little bit weird that I had to take entrepreneurship classes through the School of Engineering. But I think that was sort of the first sign that what the business school was going to give me in terms of like direction and career trajectory wasn't quite in line with what I knew my goals to be. And it was very, I mean, most business schools are very sort of corporate focused, which is not necessarily a bad thing. I think that's why they're so popular. But I just knew, especially after being in the program, it was a 3-year program. I found out pretty quickly that that would not be very fulfilling for me. The sort of like 9 to 5 or like 8 to 6 work days, dressing up business professional every single day and like working these long strenuous hours. So I remember actually one of one of my criteria when I was looking for an internship junior year, was that it had to be something where I wouldn't have to wear a tie.
I love it.
So
That's, like, a legit thing, though, like, doesn't that cause, like, throat cancer or something? I think I saw, like, some article, like, ties are, like, literally bad for you.
possibly. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. They're definitely not very comfortable.
I I I mean, I don't wear ties, but I imagine that they aren't fun. Um, yeah, and it's also, like, a cultural thing, like, ties, like, and, like, being stuffy and stuff like that, like
Yeah. And I felt like a lot of the corporate world too, is, for lack of a better term, like very performative. I feel like there's just like a level of etiquette and like politeness that you have to have, and you have to really just like shield your true like ideas or like emotions or thoughts in order to sort of like not go against the grain.
Yeah, a lot of it is optics as well, which, like, I'm not a huge fan of. But, so you decided so after traveling, you decided, like, your first, like, entrepreneurial venture, I would say modeling's an entrepreneurial venture because 'cause you're, like, doing your own thing. Like,
Yeah.
what made you decide, like, "I'm gonna become a model?" And, like, do you mind telling me about that process?
Yeah. I mean, it was definitely not something that was ever on my radar until I decided to go for it. Um, in college, I had some people randomly, they'd be like, "Oh, wow, you like, I feel like you could model." And I don't know, I didn't really, that was never very validating. And I was like, okay, I don't know who this person is really.
Like, "Are you
I don't
just
know this
hitting
person.
on me? Like, is that what's
Yeah,
happening
no,
right?" Yeah.
exactly. I was like, are you just trying to compliment me? I guess thanks, but it's also kind of strange because I also never felt like I would ever be a model or would be capable of that. But kind of how it worked out is that because I was traveling so much, um, I was just posting like travel pictures to my Instagram. And one of my friends who went through the theater program at Michigan ended up moving to LA to pursue acting. And he reached out one day because I had just posted like a travel photo, and he's like, I think you should try modeling. And that was like, I don't, okay, I don't know what that entails, but like, I guess if somebody in entertainment who's like an actor, which I thought was, close enough to modeling, like is telling me that I should go for it, like maybe there's something there. I was also, I think at the time, I was wrapping up my travels and I was starting to think about like job applications and like what I'm gonna do next, or maybe I even did start applying jobs. I don't remember, but I kind of went into it with the mindset of like, okay, yeah, I'll definitely try modeling. It sounds fun. I'll give it a shot. I have literally nothing to lose because I'm just planning on getting a job anyway. So I thought it would just be basically a fun extension of my gap year, and flew down to Chicago from Michigan and just went to the open calls for these agencies. And what an open call is basically pre-COVID. Uh, there were days and times that you could literally just walk in to modeling agencies and be like, "Hey, I'm interested in modeling," and they would sort of like take a look at you, take your measurements, whatever. Um, and so that's what it. I just flew down. I crashed with a friend here in Chicago, went to a few agencies, literally just turned up off the street, filled out some paperwork, uh, got turned away by quite a few. I think I went to four. One of them straight up just told me no.
Mhm.
Another one was interested. They took some photos. They said they would be in touch. Another one wasn't thrilled that I wasn't living in Chicago at the time because I came from Michigan and I was just there for, like a few days. So they were like, yeah, get back in touch with us, I guess, if you do move to Chicago. And then another one told me, they met with me. They're like, yeah, I think you have some really great potential. Um, we want you to like tone up, clear your skin, and come back in a month. And at that point, I had been working out probably like 3 or 4 times a week because I was on the cheer team at Michigan, and so I just kept sort of that workout routine. And in my head, I was like, how what more can I do if I'm already like working out like 4 times a week? Um, so that was sort of a whole adventure for a month. I reached out. I had another sort of acquaintance or somebody that I knew who started his modeling career also in Chicago, and I reached out to him and I was like, hey, do you have any tips on like how to get in better shape or how to like clear up my skin? And I was reaching out to so many people. I had like pretty bad acne scars. I still have some acne scars, but they're less noticeable now. But I kept the workout routine, and really the thing that made a huge difference was like tightening up my diet, which was never something that I ever had to think about, especially in college.
Yeah,
Um, so kept the same workout routine, fixed the diet, or at least like I guess for the first time in my life, like went on a diet.
yeah.
And honestly, my skin cleared up a little bit. I definitely saw a difference in like my physical appearance. Um, went back to the agency or sent the agency photos again like a month later, and they were like, "Yeah, you look really great. Good job. But we don't really have the demand right now to take on new talent." And at that point, I was just like,
What the hell? Yeah.
okay, so that was like a month of my time. And I sort of prefaced it too, like, I sort of prepared myself for that scenario just in case. Because I was like, okay, worst case scenario, if this doesn't pan out, it's a no, but you also haven't lost anything. You knew that coming in.
Yeah.
And I was like, but you will have spent a month and now hopefully you just look better. So that could be a pro. Um, so I was a little disappointed. I just dropped the idea of modeling for a while and then started reapplying to like normal jobs. And then out of the blue, 2 weeks later, I get an email, and in all caps, it's just the subject just says representation. And it's from like a lady that I did not speak with, an agency that I had never heard of. And so I was like, okay, this seems kind of fishy.
Yeah.
Where is this coming from? So I called up my friend and I was like, hey, do you know anything about a Stewart Talent in Chicago? And he was like, oh my God, like, don't tell me you got offered a contract with them. And I was like, I think so. Like, somebody just emailed me from them, from the agency. And he was like, okay, they are like the agency to be with. He's more on the acting side, and Stewart is more so like a commercial and like actor focused talent agency. But they do have like a commercial modeling side. So basically, he was like, dude, if I had stayed in the Midwest, like Stewart would have been my number one choice. And they are definitely a great industry. They have like a great reputation in the Midwest and all around the country. So then I was like, okay, cool. Like I'll meet with this lady then, seems legit. And yeah, flew back down to Chicago, I think like a week later, met with the lady who is now my agent, and honestly couldn't be happier with how it turned out. I think it was definitely for the best, with my, I guess, look, as we call it, being sort of like ethnic and Asian. I book a lot more like commercial work, and also there's not a lot of fashion in Chicago, so there's just not that scene anyway. Um,
How did
but
she
yeah.
find you?
Oh yeah, yeah. Sorry, totally glazed over that.
No, you're good.
Um, so that agency, Stewart Talent, is like sister agencies with another agency that I had visited.
Oh, okay.
So basically, how it's split up is like Stewart Talent is the like actor and commercial side, and then at the time it was called Factor Chosen. That was like the modeling and runway side. So I
Oh,
went to the
okay.
open call for Factor Chosen. They told me no. And then the lady who's my agent saw me in the waiting room the day that I came in for my open call. And when I had left, she apparently went into the factor office and was like, hey, who was that guy that came in? And they were like, oh, it was somebody that was here for open call. And she was like, okay, well, if you don't end up signing him, like, toss me his information.
Oh my God. I'm imagining like she had like, like those Snapchat filters where it zooms in slowly and then there's like hearts and it has like romantic music. Like she saw you and she was like, Nico.
Well,
That's
I think that's
awesome.
that's kind of probably how it worked. I mean, she is such like a go-getter, and she's this like shorter, half Asian, half Jamaican lady. Um, but her office just had like big glass like doors and whatnot, and so I definitely think I probably passed it, and she literally, that's just kind of how agents have to be. They sort of have to always be like on the lookout for new talent and whatnot. So I think she saw me like walk by or something and probably was like, okay, who is this? Never
You.
seen that person before.
That's so fascinating how like, and that's how like kind of like, whatever you believe in, whatever. I kind of like use the term like universe, whatever. But like you didn't like you like failed, quote unquote
Oh yeah,
failed,
totally. Yeah.
and then it ended up like you got success like from a way that you weren't even anticipating. Like that's so weird. Like you got reached out to by a lady that you've never even heard about and it ended up being like the best like agency that like what the heck? Like do you have like a point of view on that? Like or are you just kind of like, well, yeah, here we are now.
Well, it was definitely very like fortuitous. It like you said, I definitely failed, or I didn't succeed in the way that I was expecting to.
Yeah.
Um, and to this day, I mean, I don't really have a good explanation as to why it worked out. Obviously, I'm glad that it did, but I guess it could just be maybe one of those things like that's chalked up to like it was meant to be or whatever.
Yeah, fate, whatever.
But I think also you have to put yourself in positions where you're like open to opportunities. And I think that's been a big part of my life and why I'm comfortable taking risks is because I always try to be open to various outcomes. You know, like what happens if I do succeed? What happens if I don't succeed? What happens, you know, if something randomly comes up? Would I feel comfortable taking an opportunity over like pursuing a job necessarily if something did come up? So I think that also had a big part to play because I just generally tried to be open
Yeah.
to opportunities, I guess, no matter how they come about.
Yeah, you put yourself, like, in the arena. So, like, if yes, I love that because I think that there's, like, a thing going on, like, with, like, manifesting or visualizing your dreams, but, like, that without action is not very helpful. Like, you
Yeah,
can't just, like, hope until something happens. Like, you went to the casting call, like, which is why that random thing happened, you know? You were, like, doing stuff, and, mm, I love
yeah,
that.
exactly. Somebody told me once, I think it was like a receptionist. I had just moved to Chicago and uh, I remember this experience just because I remember her little bit of like inspiration that she gave me and just got my hair cut. I was like waiting for my ride. It was the dead of winter and I was brand new to Chicago. And the woman's just like, "Oh, nice haircut." I was like, "Thanks. I just got it done." And she was like, "You look like you could model." And I was like, "Oh, yeah, actually, I am a model, and that's why I had to get my hair cut." And she was like, I love that. Like, I love that. And we just got to talking and we were talking about, you know, like opportunities and how I just was like pursuing this crazy thing. And she was talking about like her kids and whatnot. And I remember by the end of the conversation, she was like, you know, the universe will give you what you need. The universe will provide you with opportunities, but you need to meet the universe halfway. And
Mm,
I was like, wow, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Like you can't just sit around and wait for things to happen. You have to get the ball rolling and put in at least some of the work, sometimes all the work,
yeah.
um, and then the opportunities will come to you. But you can't just expect things to come to you if you haven't worked for it and you haven't done your part.
I like that. I like that co-creation idea. Yeah, like you have to do yours. The universe will also, I mean, the universe like will always do its part.
Yeah.
Um, so then after modeling for a little bit, you were like, "Hey, I'm gonna go into photography." And you just like did that and now you're a photographer. And then like part 3, we're gonna get into like your current business. But like, my God, like, so like what did you just see an opportunity there?
Yeah, I think really what sparked it? Well, first of all, I was actually photographing before I started modeling, but it was mostly just as like a hobby.
Mm.
Even during our internship, I remember running around on our weekend adventures with like a GoPro all the time.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah, yeah.
I was just always that friend in the group that had a camera. Like even in high school, I'd have those little like digital point and shoot cameras. So photography was something that I was always interested in. It was sort of like a creative outlet for me, and it was something to do also while I traveled and just to take like travel pictures and um, document sort of the cool adventures that I go on. Um, and what sparked me wanting to start a business from it, or at least try to monetize it, is that with modeling, like especially my first year, my first probably 2 years, I wasn't making that much money. It was more like a side job. And I was working these other jobs, like mostly service industry jobs. Um, I was like a bar back. I was a receptionist at like a hair salon. I was a server. I was a host. I was a bellman. Like you name it, I probably dabbled in it. But I realized very quickly that it wasn't anything that I was passionate about. And I also just didn't really like the energy of a lot of the places that I was working at. You know, it was like, at least my experience was sort of, it was a lot of people sort of talking about like other people rather than talking about like bigger ideas or like
Mm,
necessarily how they want to further their career. So I
yeah.
just felt sort of stagnant in a lot of those positions. And I knew that also I had a degree that I just was not using. So it was hard for me to swallow my pride and take some of those positions because I knew I was qualified to do other things. Um, so at the beginning of last year, beginning of 2019, said, you know what, I'm kind of fed up with all of this stuff. And at the end of like a year of working in the service industry, I have nothing that I would put on my resume.
Mm.
So like, what is the point except for, you know, some extra money?
Mhm.
And since it's just extra money, can I do that elsewhere? And I would write down, I remember I'd be at my job and whatever job it was, and I would write down like on napkins or like scribble down on like pieces of paper, like, okay, like how do I get out of this? What can I do? What other skills do I have? What can I build? And I just started like generating ideas. I would read books about like how to start businesses, about entrepreneurship in general. I would try some of the exercises. I would literally write stuff down like on my breaks, and just because I was so ready to get out of that
Yeah, yeah.
space. Um, and so one thing I kept coming back to was photography because I
Mm.
have a camera, I have like some of the equipment, I have a skill set, I know I love it. And then I started to really ponder on that. And then I was like, okay, well, wait, a lot of my friends are professional models, and you have connections to agencies in the city of Chicago, and you know all of these different agents and bookers and models, and you know other photographers that like you could go to for help. So I was like, you know what? I'm gonna go for photography. We're gonna see if we can monetize photography and become like a professional photographer. Um, so I remember I left like my job, which was bartending at the time, and started to build my photography portfolio. I reached out to some of my close friends and I was like, hey guys, I am trying to get into photography. Like, do you want to do a shoot? And like, I'm obviously not going to charge you for it. Like, we're just going to see what we can get. And the first couple of shoots that I did, I remember the models were like, whoa, like this is really good. And this is definitely going to go in my portfolio. And I was like, yeah, no, I mean, like you also did your job. Like you're obviously a professional model.
Yeah.
Um, but I think because of those connections, I was able to skip so many steps that newer photographers, I think, often have to go through. Like I could start immediately working with professional talent and pitching myself to agencies. Um, and of course, it was all very sort of methodical. I knew how I wanted to build my portfolio. I knew sort of what types of models I wanted in my portfolio to show my diversity. And then
Yeah.
from there, it was just like a matter of showcasing my skills, and then even still now like developing those skills and continuing to improve.
There are a couple things that you said that I, like, really love. Like, so and one thing that I just wanna, like, cut any haters right from the neck. Like, there are some people who are, like, listening that might be like, "Well, he had all these connections, like, how could I do something like that?" Like, like, he was, like, already there. You didn't have any connections, like, you made your connections, It was, like, through you modeling that you met people. So, like, I
Right.
feel like people I have a really, like, sticky relationship with the phrase, "It's not what you know, it's who you know," like, because I think that can, like, really, like, mess with people's heads to think like, "Well, my parents aren't millionaires, therefore, like, I'm screwed." Like, you can 100% make your own connections, and it's like, if you don't have connections, think about what you can do to, like, make those connections.
Yeah, definitely. It's all about seeing opportunities and being able to create opportunities for yourself. Having connections is obviously huge, and then knowing how to like leverage those connections. That was definitely something that gave me confidence in pursuing photography because, like I said, I thought about all the different like facets of how I would go about being a professional photographer. Um, and it was through all of that like ruminating that I kept thinking about, okay, well, wait, like your really good friend is also a model. Like you are a model. Your agent books photographers. Like you've been on set for enough photo shoots that you kind of know what to do. You know sort of the etiquette and like how to work with people. And um, so yeah, it was because I had developed those connections that it helped me then leverage them later on. And when I started modeling, I had no idea I was gonna like, start photographing professionally as well. But it just turned out that that was like a those were some assets that I could leverage in my pursuit of photography.
Right, and you're talented at it, like, so that was, like, another part. It's not just like, "Oh, well, I know these cool people," it's like you're also good. Like, so again, with that, like, meeting halfway thing, like, good to know people,
Totally.
but you also gotta be good. Um, I also like, a common theme that I'm seeing from, like, modeling to photography is that, like, you're so good at asking your friends. I remember even when modeling, when you had those 4 weeks that you had to, like, get it together. Like, I
Hmm.
remember the post that you posted on Facebook being like, "Hey friends, can you help me?" And you had like 80 comments and stuff. Like, I feel like that's something that sometimes I struggle with, and I know like several people do, is like asking for help. Like, it do you mind touching on that? Like, I think it's so beautiful, like, how that you just like ask friends for help.
Yeah, I definitely understand sort of where you're coming from. That I, of course, also struggle sometimes with asking for help on certain things. But I think what helps is being open to like reciprocity too. In the
Mm,
same way that I'm always open to helping friends or friends of friends if they have questions about, modeling or photography or like starting a business. Um, I try and see it from that perspective too. If ever I feel nervous about asking for something, I try and
mm.
flip the script and say, okay, well, what if somebody asked me for that? Like, what if a close friend asked me for that? Would I like shame them for it? And like, no, I never would. And so that also helps me get over my own like fear of like, oh, but what if it's like perceived incorrectly or something like that. And then also just making sure that you're going about it in a way that doesn't seem like you're trying to take advantage of somebody, right? Like,
Mm,
you want to ask for help and you want to be genuine about it. You want to be sort of like transparent and vulnerable. It is a very vulnerable situation when you have to ask for help. um, but I think when you've spent the time to like nurture genuine connections, of course your friends and your family want to help you with the things that you need help with, and
yeah.
like see you succeed. So um, that's another way to sort of just get over that fear of asking, because people do, if they're your like if they are truly your friend, and like if they really are close with you, they want to do what they can to help you within reason. But um, yeah, I don't think anybody should necessarily feel too much shame in asking for help. Everybody needs help, and um, there's even that phrase like, if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together. I think that's totally true.
I love that. I love the reciprocity idea, of just, like, if I'm ever like so, advice for myself, like, if I'm ever feeling, like, hung up or feeling weird about, like, asking for help, be like, "What if that person asked me?" Like, I would always be like, "Yeah,
Yeah.
amazing." Like, um, same thing with, like, texting an old friend that you've, like, thought that you just, like, thought about, like, sometimes I'm like, "Well, I haven't talked to them in, like, 5 years, so that's kinda weird." But I'm like, "But if they messaged me, I'd be like, oh, that's amazing." So, like, yeah, I really like that mindset. Um, one more thing because, like, heaven forbid you're, like, only doing 2 things for a career. You started a jewelry company. So,
I did.
talk to me about Atlas, which I'm wearing some right now,
Oh
and
yes, we're matching actually. Then
yes,
I
look
have
at
mine on too.
us. Ugh, love it.
I love that for us.
I know. Tell me, tell me, tell me.
All right, so it's almost like the 1 year anniversary of like when I first sort of had the conversation to start Atlas. So 2019 was such a great year for me, like for photography, for modeling especially. And I felt like I had a good enough hold on photography that I could then dedicate sort of my free time for 2020 to building something else. And I really was interested in like owning my own sort of more traditional business,
Mm,
not necessarily like a service, but something like selling some type of like product somehow. So I think
use
I
that
started.
degree.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And so I was thinking, I think I started thinking maybe summer of 2019, and I was like, all right, what's my project going to be for 2020? Like, what other businesses do I want to start? What else do I want to pursue? And after a while, I was like, okay, I went through some more of those like entrepreneurship exercises on like how to generate ideas and whatnot. And I started thinking about my own pain points and like things that I buy into or things that I find interesting. And at the time, I was really interested in like accessories and
Mm,
specifically like jewelry. And so I was just shopping around and I was trying to find like cool jewelry that I would wear. And a lot of what I was seeing was either just really generic and cheap, like H&M, Top Man, kind of like uh, just like cheaper party jewelry.
mhm,
Or it was really cool, but then it was also like hella expensive. And so I was like,
mhm,
well, I can't afford that. And I also don't know if I like jewelry enough yet to like spend $200 on a necklace.
yeah,
So then I started thinking about, okay, well, maybe that's actually an opportunity for me to like, if I don't see it for myself, maybe I can create it for myself. So then I started thinking about, all right, there's a space obviously for like unique jewelry that is not super expensive, but also isn't horribly cheap. And I just sort of let that idea marinate for like the rest of the year. I would tell people about it sometimes and just be like, yeah, I'm thinking about starting a business in 2020. I'm kind of leaning towards jewelry. And I feel like I was sort of intentional in those conversations too, because I feel like if you want to get something done, tell somebody about it, because then that kind of holds you
pressure,
accountable to some extent
yeah,
to actually follow through. So I would start telling people about it, and then I would just start dedicating a lot of like my headspace to it and putting thought into it. And last year, at literally around this time, it's almost like to the day. One of my friends, one of my really really good friends, his name is Pat. He came back because he's from Chicago. He came back home for the holidays, and we caught up. And I was like, "Hey, we should catch up. I haven't seen you in like a year. I want to know what you're up to." He lives in San Francisco now. Um, but he was one of my best friends in college. We both went to business school together. We were both on the cheer team. We were both even like stunt partners for nationals one year. So we just became like super, super close. And Pat was always in a band his whole life and still is in a band. And I had more of like a visually creative side to me. So we were both always sort of communicating with each other about like being an artist as well as a business person and striking that balance. And after we graduated, I went like the more creative artist route, started pursuing modeling, and he actually moved to San Francisco, started working for Cisco, and then eventually Google. But we were still always in touch with each other about like, oh, this is what I love about modeling. This is what I really hate about modeling. And he'd be like, this is what I love about the corporate world. This is what I really, really hate about the corporate world. But um, he left his job in 2019 to pursue his band full time. We were catching up. I remember we were at a pho restaurant, and I was like, "Yeah, dude, I'm thinking my big project for 2020 is going to be like starting a business. I want it to be ecom, and I'm thinking jewelry." And he was like, "Oh, cool. You like, yeah, that sounds interesting." Just started telling him about the idea, and then I was like, I mean, like, do you think that you would like be interested in like doing something like that? And he was like, honestly, like I'm not really that passionate about jewelry, but I am looking for a project for 2020. And we left the pho place, went back to my apartment, started like having drinks and just started talking about the idea more. And then by the end of it, he was like, dude, that actually sounds like a pretty well thought out like plan. And like
4
I'm
drinks
down.
later, he's like,
Yeah,
"I'm in."
yeah. Literally, it's like, all right, I'm in, count me in.
You made him, like, sign something while he's, like, hammered. You're like,
Yeah, literally.
"Confirmed, Pat."
Right. Locked in now with the contract. No, but I remember I think we were just like drinking beer and playing Super Smash Bros. And yeah, we decided like we were gonna make it happen for 2020. And I remember that was right around New Year's, like right around New Year's Eve. And it worked out perfectly. I think he's actually, when I was thinking about starting the company too, I was, who do I have again? Like, who can I ask for help on this? Um, and it's going to be a pretty big venture, so I don't think I can do it alone, or at least I can't do it as efficiently alone as I could if I had somebody else. And I started thinking about people with the skill sets that would be complementary to mine, who would also be like interested in this. And he was literally the only person that I felt confident enough in, um, because his background is in marketing strategy. Like he was doing Um, he was like marketing sales at Google, and he has experience like running social media ads and all of that, like all of the technical stuff that I have no idea how to do. But at the same time, he's also creative, and so like we can bridge that gap in communication, where I handle all the branding stuff and he handles all the back end, like everything from like web design to like audience targeting to social media ads. But we know enough about each other's spheres that we're able to tell him, like, I can say, okay, I can help you build this audience. I just can't help you find them, but I can help you sort of identify who it is. And then at the same time too, like I can be like, hey, what do you think of this photo? Or what do you think about, sort of this concept for our visual like layout or whatever? And he can give me a little bit of feedback, and then he can actually like execute it.
Mm,
So it was like the perfect storm of like complementary skills
yeah.
of like business and creative. And it worked out like perfectly. I remember, I think January 1, we started working on it. He went back to San Francisco, and we just started sort of like meeting uh, over like Zoom calls or phone calls or whatever it was, and we started, putting to the Google Docs, and really just like got the ball in motion.
Yeah, and now it's like, like, I remember you saying, like, in November, like, you guys really took off this year.
Yeah, so we launched at the end of March, um, and it was like a travel inspired brand, and of course the end of March also coincided with the height of COVID, so we had quite a few things to work through. I think every day we have something to work through, but launched in March. We had sort of a soft launch where we just plugged it on our own social media channels, and through that we actually were able to recoup all of our startup costs, which is really exciting for us. And um, we didn't spend like a ton to get the business off the ground anyway, but
Yeah, yeah, I kinda wanna, like, dive into that a little bit, like, you
yeah.
started off on, like, a pretty shoestring budget, so, like,
Oh,
I
totally.
think another thing too, like, for folks listening is like, "Oh, well, like, I don't have the resources to start a company," or, "I don't have whatever, whatever," but you started you guys did not have a ton of upfront costs.
Yeah, not at all. And that was part of also the challenge for myself. I basically started the year and I was like, okay, I want I want to start something, but I'm not comfortable losing any more than like $1,000
Mhm.
on something, and I don't want to spend any more than that, or like potentially lose any more than that. And then I was like, well, wait, can I actually do it for less than that? I was like, all right, can I do it for like $300? And I think it ended up being around 1,000, but then since I took Pat on, we sort of like split the costs. Um, but yeah, I mean, it definitely doesn't have to cost a lot to start a business. Obviously, like a couple $100s can be a lot, like depending on where you're at. But
Completely.
I think just being open also to reworking your ideas, right? So whether you have $1,000, $10,000, $10, try to try to scale your idea back to fit like your budget.
Mhm.
So for me, I remember I wanted to like work with custom, like source the metals and like literally sketch out the designs and everything and do it all that way. And I just found out that I did not have the budget for that. So I was like, okay, well, can I find a way to scale back my operations in order to fit the budget that I do have? So yeah, sometimes, I mean, budget is obviously a very real constraint, but if you are open to iterating, you can find ways, creative ways to start small and then build capital until you're at that point of, you know, having $10,000 or whatever to invest in your business.
That's awesome, and that's amazing that you guys, like, almost immediately recouped your, like, initial investment, like, that's
Yeah,
fantastic.
the weekend was awesome. I remember we launched and we were so nervous. We were like shaking, and we were on like a phone call or like a text or whatever, and we had the time set. And then it was really just a matter of, posting the like things on Instagram and Facebook. But we were like, all right, 3, 2, 1, go, do it. And we did it. We were like, okay, now we wait. And then like orders started coming in, and of course it was just from like friends and family who wanted to support us, but we were still like, whoa, this is like really cool. And then by the end of the weekend, we like recouped our startup costs, and then we started thinking, okay, what do we do with this money? How do we reinvest it? And from March until October, it was pretty like linear as far as our sales revenue. We were reinvesting pretty much everything back into the business. And then in November, I remember Pat saying like, "Hey, we've been working on scaling this. We've been making so many big changes. Um, we have like a brand new website in the works. We have new products coming. Like November is going to be a big month, and we have to spend big too." And I was like, "All right, I guess so." And
Yeah.
that's part of also too the good part about having a partner is that he pushes me beyond like the goals that I would set for myself if I were working
That's
alone.
awesome.
And it definitely works like mutually because he was saying also, I was actually with him last night. He was saying like, "Yeah, when you told me that you wanted to start doing rings and we were still figuring out how to sell necklaces, I was like, I don't think that's a good idea because we haven't even gotten a footing on like one of our products. And now it turns out rings are some of our best sellers. But we sort of like push each other in different ways that we wouldn't otherwise push ourselves on our own. And November came around, we launched a new website, we launched some gold products, we launched a bunch of new rings. Um, and we basically like scaled our operations and our spend like 10 times.
Whoa.
And for a little while, like our sales also scaled to that extent too. And we were like, "Oh my God, what do we do?" And then it was basically just flying by the seat of our pants. Like suddenly like the inventory that we were holding wasn't nearly enough, and we were like running out of like packaging stuff, and I started having to deal with like supply chain logistics of like, okay, this is coming from here, this has like a 2 week lead time, this has a month-long lead time, this has like 3 day lead time, like we're running out of this, that, and the other thing. And
Yeah.
it was sort of like a mad scramble, but we made it happen. And I think that was we have recently, as of like pretty much yesterday, started like scaling back our advertising just a little bit because we realized we need to build out some of our operations a little bit more before we drive that amount of traffic to like our store.
Yeah.
And but it's good. I think it's a good problem to have, and we've also proven that this is a business model that can scale, which is arguably the harder part. So
Yeah.
now it's just making sure that we can keep up with sort of like what we're able to do.
I love that like a way that you guys are managing uncertainty is trust between you two. So like Pat is pushing you, you're pushing Pat, and it's just like that could be like a cool way to like manage ambiguity around certain times is get a partner that you really effing trust.
Yeah, totally. And we both obviously know each other's sort of work ethic, and we've been friends for so long. I mean, it can always be a little bit dicey when you want to start a business with a friend.
Yeah.
In the beginning, we put everything in writing, so we did actually sign contracts.
Good.
But I trust his skill set in his like area of expertise of like marketing and advertising, um, and like web design even. And he trusts my expertise in my field of like branding and like creation and all of that. And so I think also, yeah, being able to sort of just like lean on each other and like
count on each other to like do a good job is definitely helps us with uncertainty. Because otherwise, if I was trying to do some of that on my own, I would be like, "Oh my God, I don't know what I'm doing."
What do I do? What do I do? Um, so a couple things I wanted to like, which side note, Nico, I don't know if like your Bluetooth headphone
Yeah, it just
disc.
powered off, but can you still hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Like it's
Okay.
all good. We're all good. We're all good in the hood. Um, two things about Atlas is that one, it's a gender neutral jewelry company, which I think is amazing. And two, it's travel inspired. So like exactly what we were talking about in the beginning with like travel being your passion and you're able to like weave that into an entrepreneurial venture. And
Yeah.
I find that so cool. And I also want to know like how when you were working those service jobs, like you were still really hungry. Like you were spending your time writing on effing napkins and like reading like entrepreneurial books. Um, I just want to like kind of like hammer that home that that's like so cool and so important to have that like desire to do stuff.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, wherever that desire comes from, whether it's like personal passion or I think at the time for me, it was like desire to change my situation. Like I really just was not happy
Mm.
with those jobs, like where I was investing a lot of my time. And that really just, I felt like I had my back up against the wall. Like I didn't really have many other options. And so I just had to think about how to get out of that situation that was not my ideal.
Mm.
But yeah, it is important to be, sounds cheesy, but like to be passionate about what you're doing and what you're pursuing, especially if it's like a side hustle, because if you're passionate enough about it, I think people are going to see that, and it'll make it easier for you to sort of like pitch yourself or pitch your
Sell it.
product or whatever it is. People will see you're passionate, and like it'll be contagious. And also, if you're not genuinely passionate about it, you might spend more hours working on this side project than you would working like a different job. So you have to like be okay with putting all of that time and effort into something. And if
Yeah.
you don't actually like it, then it's no better than working at a job that you don't like.
Yeah. And you also like you bet on your you betted is betted the past tense of bet, but you bet on
Oh, yeah,
yourself.
that's
I
just,
think it's just the same. I don't know. You, you did that on yourself,
you
and
did
I think
that. Yeah.
yeah, you did that thing. Um, Nico, have you ever had like imposter syndrome? Like, have you ever had like the feeling of like, who am I to be doing these things?
Um, well, really quick, it's funny that you said like you bet on yourself, because we definitely did. And that was like our phrase for 2020, for Pat and I, because we didn't know if this thing would take off. We were, putting money into a business that wasn't really tested yet. And I remember a lot of like pretty difficult meetings where we just didn't know, we were like having doubts, or we didn't know like how it was going to go or what the future was going to look like. And we would just end the meeting and be like, hey, you know what? 2020, bet on yourself. You got to bet on yourself.
I love
And that was just kind of our attitude since he left his full-time job. And like, this is my reason for not having a full-time job. It was like,
Yeah.
you have to bet on yourself. You have to trust that you have like the skill set or can put in the work to make this happen. You have to literally bet on yourself. But sorry, I totally talked myself in a circle. But what's the question again?
It was about like imposter syndrome, like
Oh yeah,
feeling like who are you to be doing
I
this?
think not necessarily in any of my like entrepreneurial pursuits. I didn't necessarily feel that way. With photography, I think I got a lot of good validation from like the different models and agents that I saw, and the fact that they were actually like kind of surprised that it turned out as well as it did, because it's not uncommon for models to then want to photograph. And usually I think when agencies hear that, they're like, oh, it's another model who thinks that they can photograph.
Okay.
But then I actually kind of was a photographer before I was a model. I think where I felt imposter syndrome though before was like when I first started modeling. I think it took a while for me to even be confident enough to say like, yeah, wait, I am a model. And in the beginning too, it was difficult too, because I wasn't booking that much work. So I was like, all right, well, I signed a modeling contract, but I don't really feel validated in saying that I'm a model because I'm not really working that much. And like, definitely not like I would, compare myself to the other guys on the board. I'm like, okay, well, my abs don't look like that. My chest doesn't look like that. My jawline certainly doesn't look like that. So there was a little bit of like imposter syndrome, I think, in the beginning in
Yeah.
modeling. But I think a lot of that too was just like unlearning a lot of the stuff that was like just personal insecurities for me, and then just rolling with like, there's a reason why you're in the industry in the first place. And then work started to pick up, and you're like, okay, well, you should feel validated that like you're starting to stand out now. And it became less of like me trying to compare myself to other people and more me like focusing on like the characteristics that I have that are like making me succeed or helping me
Yeah.
succeed.
How was that work of like unlearning the insecurities you have for yourself? Like, how was that?
It was, I mean, obviously a very personal journey, but
Yeah.
I think part of Well, one part of why I wanted to jump into modeling too is because like growing up, I'm from a very rural part of Michigan, and like I was, I think, the only or maybe one of like two other like fully Asian people in my entire like high school. There were maybe like three or four like half Asians, but I just grew up and I never ever saw any like anybody in like movies or in advertisements or even in my own like immediate network or friend group um, who sort of like looked like me, or like never saw like an Asian male lead in like a movie, or like cast as like the as like the romantic interest in like a TV
Mm.
show or whatever. So I saw modeling sort of as an opportunity to, for I guess like be that person, or at least yeah, the like sort of tell that story, or bring that narrative to media and to like advertising. Um, and definitely that helped me also unlearn some of the things that I like formulated growing up, you know.
Yeah.
um, the fact that I was like booking work or working for cool companies, I was like, okay, well, you don't have to look like that, you know, to work with these companies. You have other things, like other characteristics that are attractive, even if they're not those characteristics that the other models have or whatever. And they also got some really, I know social media can be like a really toxic place, but like honestly, I've had like a lot of really nice interactions with people on social media, and especially when I was starting, um, a lot of like Filipino people or like just Asian guys would be like, you know, it's so cool like to finally see somebody like in this advertisement, or like to be like a model or whatever it is. And I think the thing that really like blew me up for a little bit was like the Mortal Kombat game. So
Yeah.
like that was one of the jobs that I booked, was being booked as like the face of Scorpion in the new Mortal Kombat. So a lot of that fan base like found all of the actors and people that were involved in the project, and a lot of them are Asian. And I got like quite a few DMs about people being like, yeah, it's so cool to like finally see some like an Asian person in like a, I guess like a desirable role, or like painted in a way that is like makes you feel more validated. Um,
Oh,
and I think it was definitely a journey. It took time, but it was sort of those little things that accumulated over the course of time that helped me realize and like shift my mindset from being like, wait, you know what? It's fine that you don't have certain qualities, or that you know that you didn't look like the other people growing up. Like those aren't really weaknesses like you thought they were. Now they're playing out to your advantage, and like that's kind of cool.
I love that. Nico, do you have any advice for someone who, like, let's just say someone is in a similar position to where you were, like working in the service industry where they just like kind of don't like their job, but
Mhm.
they're thinking about doing like an entrepreneurial venture, but aren't really sure, like, they're kind of feeling like, well, I have the safety of like my job. Like, do you have any advice for people that are kind of in that like like pickle?
Yeah. Well, first of all, like I'm not. I always have to like preface this. Like I'm not trying to knock the service industry in any way. I just realized that it was not for me. But
Yeah.
like especially in a city like Chicago, it can be like super lucrative. Um, it just wasn't like right for what I wanted. So
Yeah.
more power to you if that is. But if you are in that position and you're in any sort of job that you don't enjoy, or you just think that you could be using your potential better elsewhere, um, I think a really good piece of advice would be to like do one thing every day that gets you closer to whatever goal you
Mm.
have. So spend a lot of time thinking about like, okay, if you're unhappy with your situation, why? And what about your ideal situation is different than your current situation? And let's sort of make that your goal. Once you have a goal in mind, then take small steps, like literally do one thing every single day to get you closer to that goal. And time is going to pass regardless of whether you are working towards that or not. So you can't be discouraged by the amount of time that it's going to take you to achieve that goal, or to start a project, or to launch a business. If it's going to take you 6 months, if it's going to take you 12 months, well, that time is going to pass. And I would hate to go 12 months and think, if only I had just started that when I initially had the idea, because now that time sort of flew by and I didn't really work towards it or whatever, rather than, okay, now we're 12 months in, we have a tangible like side project to be working on, and it just sort of grew incrementally. I think a lot of people just see the end result of a lot of career trajectories or pursuits. But you definitely can't be afraid of the work that's going to be put into it, and be creative with how you are problem solving. If you don't have the budget, if you don't have the time to start working on your project as you envision it, try to scale back your idea. Try to fit your idea to the resources that you have available to you at that time, and then grow it from there. And like I said, after 6, 12 months, whatever the time frame is, you're going to inevitably be further along with that project.
I love that. The time's gonna pass anyways, so you might as well let that time pass while you're, like, improving yourself or getting more experience under your belt.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
Like, I can't
fantastic.
tell you how many times, like, a few days or like a week has gone by and I was like, whoa, where did that go? And then I was like, well, wait, what if I had just done like one thing every single day? Or like, what if I had just, taken one photograph every single day or whatever? Like, I would have had 7 cool photographs by the end of the week.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh, I really like that. You have such a good balance of, like, optimism and, like, patience as well, and also just, like, the idea, like, things are gonna take time, but that time's gonna pass any hooters, so you might as well just be, like, doing stuff that you
exactly.
enjoy doing. Ah, that is so great. Nico, it's been so good chatting with you, and I think that's such a beautiful note to end on. How can people find you? How can people find Atlas? Tell me.
Yeah. All right, let's plug it real quick. Well,
Yeah,
I'm wearing like a bunch of the stuff that's
I
just kind
know.
of comes with the territory, I guess, of owning a jewelry company.
Yeah.
But mostly I use Instagram mostly. It's just my name, Nico Millado. I also recently started a TikTok like a few months ago.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if I'm gonna keep up with it too much, but for now it's pretty fun. It's kind of also that idea of like do one thing every day. It started as like do one video every day and just see what happens. And then it turned out that was actually a lot more work than I thought it would be. So now I'm just kind of using it for fun. But yeah, Nico Millado on TikTok as well. And then Atlas Jewelry, it's Atlas Jewelry Co. on Instagram. And then the website is atlasjewelryco.com. And I have everything linked in like all of my social media stuff and like on
Cool.
Instagram. So
Yeah, and I'll put all that business in the show notes and everything like that.
yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Nico.
Oh, it's literally always so good to talk to you, to catch up with you.
I
And
know.
I love your pursuit of this podcast.
Thank you. Thank you. Like that's like another thing of like betting on myself. Like I had a very similar situation as you where I was just like, I fucking want to do this. So I just like
Mm-hmm.
did it. And I'm kind of thinking like long term as in like even like 10 years from now. Like
Yeah.
if I do this, like when I'm 36, like something is bound to happen by then. Like,
Yeah.
like
Like surely something has to.
I know. And if it doesn't, then like when I'm 36, that's time when I can be like, okay, let's hang it up, like we're done. But
Yeah.
like, yeah, just like, cause like then, like 36, I'll have 10 years of this stuff like under my belt. Like
Yeah.
that's
And imagine
fantastic.
developing that skill set over the course of 10 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
Incredible. Yeah. One last thing I'll say too on the subject of like starting a side hustle or like dealing with fear too, or getting out of a situation that you don't want to be in. This made me think about it because like we've been such good friends, and I've taken a lot of inspiration from you too. You have to surround yourself with the right network of people. And that was one thing that I realized working in the service industry, is that I just had different goals than a lot of the people I was interacting with. And so inevitably my conversations would not be about side hustles and entrepreneurship. And so my time wasn't going towards thinking about those things. But I also made like a visible shift in my network at the beginning of like 2019 and thinking about, okay, I spent 2018, had a really good time, but at the end of it, like, I don't know, I didn't really make that much progress. And I was like, all right, I need to be really conscious of not only where I'm spending my time, but who I'm spending my time with. And it's so important to surround yourself with sort of like-minded individuals and people who will push you past